And we're live. Hoping that Wicked can step on today. Got a couple things we want to cover. Hopefully Wicked can jump on and join us. She said she was able to make Friday, so we'll see. So I wanted to point out something. I wanted to bring out a couple shootings that occurred. And I want to talk about the difference in how the media presents the shooters when it's one race. Oh, you'll see. But first, we're going to go to the Post Millennial, give you a story. The one I wanted to read was MTV pushed this kid to transition, just like Jazz Jennings. MTV's trans poster child bitter about transition after being left scarred, hairy, and infertile. But according to the Surfs, that fucking idiot from Canada, this doesn't happen. Anecdotal, he would say. Quote, it turned out to be a big mistake, unquote. On Wednesday, a former MTV poster child for giving minors sex changes opened up in a video on YouTube about regretting her transition. It turned out to be a big mistake, Milo said in the now private video. In 2016, Milo appeared in an MTV documentary called Transformation. The network used the transition of the then 16-year-old to glorify the practice. Her mother said on the show how she feared Milo would commit suicide. And we are going to play this video. At times he feels like he could hurt himself, just because of the way he feels inside. I've heard a lot of horror stories of, the percentage of trans kids that commit suicide. The documentary goes on to discuss how many trans youth commit suicide. Other detransitioners have discussed how this is used to manipulate parents into placing their children on the road to transition. Detransitioner and child advocate Chloe Cole has discussed how doctors warned her parents of this when she was seeking help for her gender confusion. Quote, they told my parents that if I wasn't allowed to transition, then it was very likely that I would kill myself, unquote. She said in an interview with Jack Posobiec in April. According to the Daily Mail, Milo received weekly shots of testosterone on the show. Shortly after the show aired, she went through a double mastectomy procedure. Milo went on to have a hysterectomy last year after dealing with some discomfort from increased doses of testosterone. Chris Elston, also known as Billboard Chris, posted on Twitter that MTV helped fuel the craze of child transition with his 2016 documentary, This Is Evil, There Is No Such Thing as a Transgender Child. So they did perform an underage double mastectomy. But that doesn't happen, right? Media companies have used gender-confused youth to make money and shape a narrative to promote sex changes in minors. TLC's show I Am Jazz began airing in 2015 and has followed Jazz and his Jewish adoptive parents around ever since. In a recent episode, Jazz told mother Jeanette, I just want to feel like myself. She continued, I just want to be happy and feel like me, and I don't ever feel like me. TLC trapped Jazz on the road to transition because of the backlash. When a detransitioner tells their story, the backlash is great. In a follow-up video, Milo requested that people don't share her video and set it to private. Another detransition female, Prisha Mosley, said in a statement about Milo on Twitter, Milo has surely seen the hate that public transitioners get and hasn't had time to do any healing or processing. She's a very vulnerable place. Detransition is hard. It's painful and vulnerable and raw, and the whole world watches. Body parts are missing, and you don't feel or look like yourself. What Milo needs right now is peace and to have her wishes respected. Stop sharing her video. Well, I'm gonna not listen on that last
You
part.
shared with us some very powerful testimony, and I would say that that was testimony about what this movement is doing to this country, the radicalization of the youth in many cases, but also other members of society like this Audrey Hale down in Tennessee. But I wondered if you can to share with us your story for the audience. Uh, we know about the law that you're suing Kaiser Permanente now, but take us
And I don't like Turning Point USA. I think they're a bunch of neocons. But on this issue, they're correct.
back to when you yourself first encountered the transgender movement, transgenderism online as an ideology, and walk us through what that was like for you.
So my first exposure to it was through the internet, through social media. I got my first phone when I was 11, and the first social media app that I really used was Instagram. And I'd say that I was a pretty vulnerable kid in a lot of ways because I was a little bit more on the gender non-conforming side. I was more of a tomboy, and I had some body image issues. I started puberty pretty early, and I became pretty conscious of that from a very young age. And I was being fed a lot of these images of women that I felt like I couldn't match up to. And on top of that, I was in the communities that I would browse on things like video games and shows that I watched. There were a lot of other kids and young adults who identified as either gay, lesbian, bisexual, or overwhelmingly transgender. A lot of them were non-binary or they identified as the opposite sex. And I started seeing a lot of posts that were specifically about transitioning and gender and sexuality. And because I was at an age where naturally I would start to wonder like about myself, where I stood in the world, who I was attracted to, and what role I would fill in the world. And after being exposed to this stuff for so long, I started to wonder about my own sexuality and gender identity. And after a while, it just made sense that as a very masculine girl who never fit in, never really felt very pretty, it just made sense that this whole time I was a boy. And I started to change myself in pursuit of that. I started to cut my hair short. I started to wear different clothing, and I tried to act more like the boys at school and even change my name. And I came out to my parents when I was 12, going on 13, and their reaction was to take me to a therapist because they didn't know how to handle this. They didn't know anything about this, and they thought that it would be best to get a professional involved. But what ended up happening was that my delusion of actually being the opposite sex was affirmed. I was treated as if I were a boy. They only referred to me by my preferred name and by my preferred pronouns, and they didn't go by anything else. They never even went into the underlying issues that I had, and what they knew of, they didn't address. It was just treated as a completely standalone issue from my gender dysphoria. And they told my parents later that in an appointment they had, I don't think I was there for this actually, so I couldn't really refute anything that was said, and I didn't know what they were telling my parents at the time, but they told my parents that if I wasn't allowed to transition, then it was very likely that I would kill myself. And this was when, at the time, I was starting to ask my parents to take me to an appointment to put me on hormones because I thought that that was the natural progression of things, that it was the only means of treating gender dysphoria, and that I should be on these treatments, ideally as early as possible, because that was how the trans community represented things. That was how the research that I did, both from the community and from official medical resources, seemed to point to this as the only way of treating my condition.
Did your parents question the doctors at all? Did they ever have a time where they pushed back and said, this seems extreme? You know, and of course you want to trust your doctor, but obviously some of the things that you're talking about here are quite extreme and certainly, shall we say, not exactly commonly understood. I mean, I don't think people are used to, and certainly at that age, these types of procedures going on. So was there any level of pushback like that?
Yeah, there was actually. They were okay with me changing the way I dressed, and they tried to go along with my name change, but they didn't want me to be making any permanent decisions. They didn't want that on their hands. They didn't want me to make any choices that I very well could regret as an adult. And they told this to the doctors. They voiced their concerns, and they were just ignored.
And so at that point, I know at some point, and obviously you've told the story before, at what point do they go from not just blockers and hormones, but to actual surgery?
Right. So just about half a year after I was diagnosed with gender dysphoria was when I was put on blockers, and a month after that was when I was put on testosterone. And they actually broke their protocol for gender dysphoric children.
That seems so fast. I'm sorry, that's shocking to me. That seems so fast. That seems extremely aggressive.
Yeah, it was actually pretty similar with the surgery even. I started treatment at 13, and 2 years later, after my sophomore year, was when I underwent surgery. And my first appointment for that was roughly around the same time period. It was about half a year before that point.
So it's half a year. And then, so at this point, you know, you've undergone all this. Are you feeling, though, at some point you talked about the feelings that you had when you were online, you were interacting with this content online, other users, and that you were feeling these feelings of not fitting in. At any point, did you feel those feelings go away? Did you start to feel like you fit in? Did you start to feel like you were actually becoming your true self, as supposedly they say is a way you're supposed to feel?
Yeah, it was more like with each treatment, there was like a honeymoon period. Once I started on testosterone, which I was in my 8th grade year, and I hadn't really come out to anybody yet. I wasn't initially accepted by my peers when I started transitioning, because I mostly attribute it to the fact that I was in middle school and people just aren't nice, especially towards kids who present differently. But once I was in high school, I was on testosterone for long enough that my voice was fairly deeper than most boys my age at the time, actually.
Right. I just want to stop for a second and say that this is a very common side effect of giving testosterone to girls, is their voice drops in pitch or volume, and that's permanent. That's forever. The worst thing, though, is this woman can now never have children. She's infertile. She's sterile. That's it. It's not reversible in any way. And I think the parents should sue the hospital and sue the doctors and sue them into bankruptcy, and so that their great-grandchildren have to pay this woman's psychological bills. There are other things I feel, but I'm not going to say them on this platform.
The testosterone was very effective. But I appeared to be just like any other boy my age, and nobody other than people who I went to elementary and middle school with knew that I even was a biological female. And there were a few instances when I was outed behind my back, but for the most part, nobody knew, and they just saw me as another one of the boys. And there was kind of that comfort of being able to make male friends and be as part of a group and seemingly be accepted for who at the time who I thought I was. But that went away after a while. Reality started to set in, and my relationships weren't as close anymore. I didn't really have a lot of room to talk about my feelings or my personal struggles, and my dating pool was really severely limited by this. I mean, a lot of my other friends were getting into relationships and getting girlfriends and boyfriends, but I was somebody who appeared to outwardly be male, but I was still attracted to males, and this proved very difficult. There were a few guys who expressed interest in me, but it often felt like, if anything, I was just an object of a fetish, mostly for these people, and it was very lonely.
Yeah, it's like there's a gimmick or a something special, but it's not. It's more about the the objectification in a sense, not you for
Right.
you. You mentioned being on testosterone. What did that feel like? What changes did you notice when you're on testosterone?
Yeah, so I was on the blockers first, and I was already about like 3 or 4 years into puberty before I started on them, and I'd already been having my period for almost 2 years by that point. So it basically sent me into a state of menopause. I had pretty much no sex hormones in my body. My sex drive went all the way down. I was very lethargic, and I was getting hot flashes and itching all over my body, and I felt pretty depressed. I just wanted to move on to the next step.
I just wanted to play that primarily uninterrupted. So that's Chloe Cole. So whenever you have these fucking people who say, oh, they gaslight you and that's not happening, and drugs, hormones at 13, double mastectomy at 16. There. Anecdotal, right, Surfs? All right. I don't know where Wicked is. Maybe she's busy. Maybe she got stuck at work. So last thing we'll do is want to show a couple shootings. There's a big video I want to cover. What I want to do is let's show this one. So this was in Baltimore. This was a shooting at a school.
Amy, thank you. In a city in crisis tonight, a Baltimore City High School student is arrested and charged with 2 counts of homicides and 6 shootings. Now, one of those incidents involved a mass shooting that killed a local boxer and injured 5 others in West Baltimore. Alexa Ashwell is live right now outside Dunbar High School, where police say the teen was arrested last week. Alexa.
Yes, Kai, officials confirmed Jabri Griffith was enrolled as a senior here at Dunbar High School. The 18-year-old was arrested in the school parking lot last week. Court documents we obtained indicate officers found drugs and a loaded .40 caliber gun in Griffith's car. Investigators say it's the same type of weapon used in both homicides.
A Baltimore City high school student charged with 2 homicides and 6 shootings, including the murder of local boxer Ernest Hall. Police arresting Jabri Griffith, a senior here at Dunbar High School, in the school parking lot.
So for all those dumb motherfuckers who say, "Oh man, you can't fight," yeah, well, I bet this 18-year-old kid couldn't fight as well as a boxer either. But you can't punch your way out of a .40 Smith & Wesson caliber. You know, I tell the story to a lot of. There's a lot of jujitsu. I live in deeper Pennsylvania, so there's a lot of wrestling and jujitsu gyms around where I live, and you know, a lot of these white guys don't fucking understand. You're not going to single leg take down a bullet. I like to tell the story about Jared Weiner. Is this international jiu-jitsu champion? He owns a gym in Jenkintown called BJJ United. And a real skinny, crackhead-looking white guy came in his gym one time. And Jared Weiner, he's sponsored, meaning gis are given to him. He got these like couple $1,000 gis that look like Transformers. He's been to the IBJJF. He's been to Brazil. He's a competitor. I'm trying to make a point. A skinny white dude came in, got beat up. The skinny white dude came back with like a machete. And Jared Weiner is a guy who spars 10 times a week, 20 times a week. He's an international jiu-jitsu competitor. Do you think he walked up to the guy with the machete, flicked his wrist, knocked the knife out of his hand, and did a judo throw? Did like a drop seyo or an ogoshi or something? No. He went in his office and got a gun. Do you understand? He's a fucking like a 2nd or 3rd degree black belt in jiu-jitsu, and an untrained under 170-pound white dude who got his ass beat by everybody in the gym came back with a machete, and Jared Weiner still went and got a piece. So to those stupid motherfuckers who say, "Oh, just put your hands up." Yeah, well, that boxer did that and he's dead. All right.
June 6. Newly obtained court documents detailing how investigators connected the 18-year-old to 2 deadly shootings, a mass shooting and a double shooting that happened on the same day, March 23rd, also a listed school day.
Over 2001 Edmondson Avenue.
Just minutes after midnight, police say 6 people were shot here on Edmondson Avenue in West Baltimore. 5 of the victims in their teens or early 20s survived, but 33-year-old boxer Ernest Hall, who had reportedly just stopped at the store, was killed.
Wrong place, the wrong time.
Court documents detailing at the scene, officers found nearly 50 shell casings, including from a .40 caliber handgun. Fast forward 11 hours.
5488 York Road.
Police say a man and a woman walk into an area hospital with gunshot wounds after being shot on York Road in North Baltimore. Victim Micah Strong is later pronounced dead. At the scene, approximately 20 shell casings are found. And according to court documents, firearms examiners were able to confirm the same .40 caliber handgun used in this incident was used in the murder of Ernest Hall. And GPS evidence, along with video evidence, shows Jabri Griffith using his registered vehicle as the getaway vehicle in both incidents.
So he kept the same car and he kept the same gun. So he's either stupid or there's no fear.
Griffith arrested
I'm going to say both.
more than 2 months later. Agents with the Warrant Apprehension Task Force moving in on the teen as he pulled into the school parking lot. In addition to a loaded .40 caliber handgun, the same type of weapon reportedly used in both homicides, court documents detail officers seized drugs, including suspected heroin and fentanyl, as well as a digital scale from Griffith's car. The teen now also facing drug charges as questions remain about a believed motive in the deadly shootings.
Now, you may recall back in April, BPD arrested and charged a 15-year-old with murder in this deadly mass shooting. Again, the believed motives in these crimes, police not yet saying.
So a mass shooting and a 15-year-old involved. So an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old. They're not going to tell you the 15-year-old because whatever reason, right? Didn't hear about it, right? Okay. So let me just refresh. This was in St. Louis. Damn, man. So that was Baltimore. We're only going to use a couple examples, and we're going to go back to Baltimore in a second.
Police want your help identifying these suspects wanted in connection with Sunday's mass shooting in downtown
See the rifles?
St. Louis, which left 11 people injured and one teenager dead. Fox News' Callista Matrician has the latest on the investigation.
You're looking at a bullet hole that remains at the office building here on Washington Avenue, and that is not all. Over to our left, you can see a huge hole in the wall, all the cause of juvenile violence that occurred this weekend. Now police are asking for the city's help in identifying 2 gunmen. It's one of several we saw on the 5th floor of the office building on Washington Avenue, where a juvenile was killed and 11 others injured on Sunday. The cause of the shooting, police think, could be the suspects, clearly carrying heavy weaponry at the site of the party.
Right. So 11 people were shot. So Negroes show up, they see ops, and they open fire into a crowd. That's called domestic terrorism.
Where many gathered.
When you cause a danger to the community and cause that type of harm, where you don't have any regard to life, they're going to go out and do that again.
It's why Chief Tracy and the city's police department need your help. Lisa Pashota with Crime Stoppers says,
if you know something about this, let's get that gun off the street. Let's get those people behind bars.
Whether you know them or not, you can remain anonymous.
We never take your name. We never take your phone number.
So far, the department is seeing tips come in.
I know a lot of people will step up, and some have already stepped up, and I thank them for that.
We spoke to an individual who works at the office complex on Washington and knows the owners well. The invasion came as a surprise.
So the doors automatically lock, and the only way you can get in is with a key card, or if somebody sneaks around and puts something in the door.
He says they just hope people come forward with information. As a stark reminder,
They chose to hurt other people. They made the choice to do this.
with these suspects out on the street, it could be a matter of time before it happens again.
You don't want this to happen near you. You don't want this to happen again. You don't want some child to die.
One juvenile was initially taken into custody and released. While multiple guns were seized in connection, it's time to find those responsible.
And I want to show another one in Baltimore. Ah, Wicked, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going? Good morning.
Morning, how you doing?
Oh, I'm good. Yeah. Hold on one second. Let me mute this. All right. Yeah, I'm good. I'm tired. I just worked 20 hours.
Man, you doing okay?
Oh, yeah. Hey, this is what I do.
Did you see the video I showed from St. Louis?
You know, I just turned it on like a minute ago.
Okay. Well, I can go back, but let's do this one. This was in Baltimore 8 days ago.
It's crazy.
Hello, I am a professional.
Jesus.
It's crazy.
It's shocking.
It's pretty horrible.
One of Baltimore City's key tourist destinations turned into a tragic crime scene last month.
Definitely affecting the tourist crowd and people that live downtown.
I don't come here at night. Let's just say that.
There are obviously children, a bunch of children.
The incident sparked by an unruly crowd of about 200 young people, Massive crowds captured on surveillance video as the main suspect, seen here, pulls out a long gun and starts spraying bullets. The same suspect also caught close up on police body cam footage, along with another suspect seen interacting with the alleged gunman moments before shots rang out.
Young people today just aren't afraid to commit an act of violence right there in front of a whole bunch of witnesses.
And feet from police.
And it brought significant enough attention that it led to a policy shift.
We are going back to the old days.
The shooting ultimately triggering Mayor Scott to reinstate the city's youth curfew.
We'll see how that plays out.
Maybe too little.
Did you see that?
That's insane.
Yeah, did you see him pull it out of the backpack? And do you see he had an issue? I think it jammed after the first shot because he was trying to clear it. That's what it looked like to me.
Yeah. Man. You know, I swear, hell is empty because demons are walking the earth.
So let's look at the let's see if I can find the original video of this. We had another black kid who shot 4 girls because the girls were fighting in Milwaukee. See if I can find the original video. I got to point to all this. I just want to, because you'll see how you had one white shooter in Annapolis, and you'll see how that's treated. But I want to show the same motive, which is they're shooting into a crowd of people.
Yes, that's what they do.
Right.
6 teens were shot, the youngest victim just 14 years old. Miriam McCarr joins us live near the scene. And Miriam, the police chief says that they've identified at least one of the shooters.
Yeah, Ryan, one of the teenagers who was injured was identified as a shooter in this case. He's now in police custody. Earlier in the day, these streets were filled with dozens, hundreds, actually thousands of people who were celebrating a joyful holiday. Now, it wasn't until after the event was over that this split-second decision ended up injuring half a dozen teenagers. Now officials are saying that something needs to be done about the youth violence in the city.
You do not have the right. You don't have the right to steal the joy that this community felt today.
6 teenagers, ranging in age from 14 to 19 years old, are suffering gunshot wounds and broken bones after a shooting broke out on Martin Luther King Jr. Drive following Milwaukee's Juneteenth parade. Police say the event was over when a fight between teenage girls escalated.
This is a story that plays out too often and it's getting really old. Really old.
Video shows that fight happened leading up to the moment.
Oh, fuck. They edited it out. I fucking hate that.
Police say a 17-year-old pulled
So
out
right
a gun
here, the kid comes out from around the corner and he pulls a gun out of his waistband and opens fire.
and started firing.
Right here. See his hands?
Mm-hmm.
I'm so tired of this. Stop fucking protecting them. See right here? See his hands?
Yeah,
He's got his hat on his pocket. He pulls the gun right here. You see that?
I see.
Right there. Then he opens fire at these girls who were fighting. I'm looking for it right now. Give me a sec.
Like the Wild
Let's
Wild
just
West.
brewer witnessing the aftermath of that.
I looked up and I saw one girl limping with her leg, and another girl was shot on the ground with a shotgun to her neck and her leg.
Milwaukee, what's going on with our children?
MPD Chief Jeffrey Norman saying this is a first.
8 years I've been part of the Juneteenth celebration as a commander, as a Juneteenth organizer. This has never happened before.
Both the chief and mayor pointing to the city's rise in youth gun violence as an epidemic that needs to be solved.
It is stupid. Arguments should not lead to guns being fired off. Period. Period. There's no reason that a young person should have their hand on a gun of any kind. No reason whatsoever.
Thankfully, there were no deaths as a result of this shooting. Officials say they want the day to be remembered for what it is, a holiday celebrating freedom and a decades-long tradition within the city.
One person pulled out a gun.
All right. I got it. And I think and I'm getting, you know me, I just want to show it. I want to show what happens. I'm tired that they did show it. And it's just annoying that I got to, it's just annoying that I got to find it because then they try to blurt it out. You see that shit?
Mm-hmm. They gotta protect them.
Charges are pending. Meanwhile, witnesses of the shooting say it is not easy.
There. So you see the girls fighting?
In this shooting that people yesterday.
It happened right after the Juneteenth celebrations ended in Milwaukee. 2 of the people injured have been arrested and charges are pending. Meanwhile, witnesses of the shootings
So he's behind her.
say it is not.
You think they were talking? Was she dissing him?
You know, well, who knows? I mean, really, do they even need an excuse for real?
No. No.
Shootings say it is not easy to talk.
Right there. So he pulls it out right there. I at least like that they show it.
Shootings say it is not easy to talk about. Madeline O'Neill joins us live now in Milwaukee with why they are sharing their stories anyway.
All right, so that was Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to go. And then this was downtown St. Louis. I'm trying to show ones that actually show the shooter.
Right.
Your help identifying these suspects wanted in connection with Sunday's mass shooting in downtown St. Louis, which left 11.
So they got rifles. See that?
11 people injured and 1 teenager dead. Fox News' Callista Matrician has the latest on the investigation.
You're looking at a bullet hole that remains at the office building here on Washington Avenue, and that is not all. Over to our left, you can see a huge hole in the wall, all the cause of juvenile violence that occurred this weekend. Now police are asking for the city's help in identifying 2 gunmen. It's one of several we saw on the 5th floor of the office building on clearly carrying.
I don't know if these, now I'm assuming these guys are the shooters, but when you show up to a party with rifles,
Are you
ready.
planning on something?
Right. So
Okay,
this is
this
St. Louis.
Patient.
So this is St. Louis. They committed a shooting in a crowd. And then we got Minneapolis, where a black 17-year-old kid opens fire at a bunch of black girls fighting. And then I showed you Baltimore down in the harbor, where another black teen pulled a rifle out of a backpack and started shooting to a crowd, right? Now I want to talk about the white guy who shot these Latinos in Annapolis. And can we just compare the
During a
coverage?
court hearing today, the lawyer of the accused.
Oh my God. Sorry, my internet's
Well, St. Louis
wonky.
police want. Well, St. Louis.
All right. Let's try it again. My mistake.
Says he's an Army veteran who suffers from PTSD, but the families of the victims say it is more than that. Scott Broom is in Annapolis with what else we learned about the case in court.
Accused mass shooter, 43-year-old Charles Robert Smith, will stay locked up without bail for now after his attorney unsuccessfully argued he should be released because he needs treatment for PTSD that Smith suffered while serving in the Army in Afghanistan between 2008 and 2013. The sister of shooting victim, Christian Segovia, spoke moments after the hearing.
We will not stop until this is, reported as a hate crime. What happened here is not, an act of PTSD. This is a murder.
Segovia was a 25-year-old father, one of 6 people gunned down during an apparent dispute between neighbors over parking on Paddington Place in the Bay Ridge section of Annapolis Sunday evening. 3 people died, father and son, 55-year-old Nicholas Morales and 27-year-old Mario Morales Ruiz, along with Segovia. Kathleen Kirshner is an attorney and family friend speaking for the grieving Morales family.
This was an unprovoked attack.
She talked about Mario, who was a father of 2 expecting a third.
And he was a really kind and nice guy. I mean, I'm totally shocked that this happened to him.
The mass shooting happened in 2 phases, police said. First, Smith is accused of using a semi-auto pistol to kill Mario Morales Ruiz and Christian Segovia during a confrontation in front of Smith's house over a party guest. who had parked at Smith's curb. Police say Smith then retreated into the house and began firing from inside with a rifle, killing Father Nicholas Morales and wounding 3 others who were reacting to the first shooting. Police have not said if it was an assault rifle.
I do not know what it was. I do know that they begged
It's a made-up term.
him to stop shooting.
Cannot keep going on. We can't keep losing fathers. We can't keep losing brothers. We can't keep losing, our loved ones like this. Not like this. Not a week before Father's Day.
For the moment, Smith is facing murder and attempted murder charges, but Annapolis police have not ruled out the possibility of hate crime charges.
And of course, I'm not
Because
condemning.
they were different. I thought this was
Yeah.
okay. Oh, so they're tacking
Was
hate
it-
crime on to make it seem extra heinous.
Well, they don't charge black people with hate crimes when they kill white people, but they do charge black people with hate crimes if they attack Asians.
Yeah, true that.
I think I got a story out of New York. Actually, let me give me a sec, but I'll ask you if you can hold it down for a second while I'm looking that up. So we saw 4 shootings,
Mm-hmm.
and these are all over Juneteenth or within the past week. So yeah, pretty much Juneteenth. I think they're similar. One person is opening fire with, I guess, reckless disregard. Now, let me give the caveat where if multiple men try to attack you and you got to shoot them or die, that's what it is. But if that's what happened and then the guy went into his home and opened fire into another house with a rifle, then you can throw him in the Susquehanna River too with a millstone, because that's not self-defense. That's now terrorist.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not trying to Monday morning quarterback, but I'm just trying to say, why weren't the other 3? Why wasn't hate crime? Especially when a guy especially one in Minneapolis where he opens fire on girls.
Well, we know what did we talk about last week? Black women are, we're not valued. We're not valued. And if one of these black kids kills other black people, it's not a hate crime because it's just black on black crime. It's what those people do, and now they really think about it. If it was like now, if those black kids open fire on Asians or somebody else, yeah, it would definitely be considered a hate crime. But if they, kill each other, just a day in the neighborhood, right?
Yeah. So I just wanted to do that as a comparison to show kind of how I'm not really understanding how this applies. Again, we see the family speak out from the Latinos, but you know what? Let's do this one. I just played this video, but let me pull up a video where they talk about how they want to handle him, and even that is different. Dunbar school student.
Has your mouth got you stuck? Morning stank breath, sensitive teeth from hot or cold stains?
Because there's a weird might be this one. Let's see.
News, we have an 18-year-old behind bars charged in a mass shooting and killing 2 people hours apart from one another. One of the victims, popular boxer Ernest Hall. WMAR2 News' Brittany Werner is at the location where police finally caught up with Hall's accused killer. Brittany.
And this kid was arrested at the school. And he had the gun and drugs and a scale in his car.
I'm sitting outside Dunbar High School. This is where police arrested Jabri L. Griffith. He was an 18-year-old student who was enrolled here. He's now facing several felony charges, including murder.
There's never a dull moment here in the city, as we can hear. There's never a dull moment. Our kids these days, we need to come together as in a community, especially with our males,
get together and see the root of this problem.
It's the outcry of concern in this West.
What do you think of what she said?
You know what? You know how I feel about what she just said. Why is this occurring? I don't know, Manny. You tell me. Maybe you got a bunch of fatherless, people being reared like animals. Okay, maybe that's it. Maybe your kids are out of control. Your sons are out of control, and they've been out of control. This is generations now, and they're just getting worse. And how is it a surprise? How is it we don't know what's happening? Huh?
Yeah.
And then they make it seem like, oh, you know what? These kids, they're victims too. They're just victims of their circumstances. How did this happen? Oh, it's just the circumstances they were born in. We don't know how this happened. There's no accountability.
Or it's the pandemic.
Okay, the pandemic. All right. Or it's Tuesday. Or, whatever. Or I don't know. There's never any accountability, and there's never any let's actually look at the facts.
This is the video I wanted to show you. Now, we saw this is the one. This is the real one I wanted to do. Comparison to the Annapolis, the white shooter.
Yeah.
But I wanted to show that there were other mass shootings, and we talked about the ones in Chicago. So I wanted to show like Baltimore, St. Louis, Minneapolis.
Yeah, it's all the same mindset, right?
I actually have a video that Candace Owens did. If you want to take a look at that.
Oh, let's see what Candace got to say.
Okay.
After hearing 18-year-old Jabri L. Griffith is now behind bars and partly responsible for a mass shooting that killed Ernest Hall and injured 5 others ranging in ages 16 to 25.
A young man, 18 years old, that means he's gone for life. Who wants that? He haven't even started living his life yet. It hardens my heart.
Police arrested Griffith at Dunbar High School, where he was a student. Charging documents show the same .40 caliber used in the mass shooting that killed Ernest Hall was linked to a different shooting 11 hours later, killing 26-year-old Makai Strong and injuring a 25-year-old woman.
We are producing our sons, our nephews, our grandsons every day. Our men, especially our black men.
That shooting happened off York Road and Woodbourne Avenue, but charging documents also show in the mass shooting near the corner of Edmondson Avenue and North Franklin Town Road, police found 49 shell casings from 3 different guns and 20 shell casings from the .40 caliber at the crime scene on York Road hours later, where Makai Strong died as a result. Police say Griffith was seen in several surveillance cameras, leaving both scenes driving his registered vehicle as the getaway car.
Yeah, so I said this earlier. So he had the same gun in the same car. So I said, I don't know if this is because he's not afraid or if he's just dumb.
Both.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said earlier. Yeah. Okay. Now listen. Now here's the scary part. Here's the mammying. Listen to what this woman says and listen to what the fucking reporter says.
I feel for their family too, because what mother, what parent wants their child going to prison or jail at an early age?
Police also arrested a 15-year-old.
What do you think about that?
Making him out to be a victim, but he had drugs, a scale, guns, and he killed people. But somehow this poor boy is going to have to go away to jail. Good. And you can take her with him.
Who they say pulled the trigger alongside Griffith in that mass shooting, and they are still looking to identify a third person.
What you gonna learn behind them bars? Your life is gone. I empathize with both families, and prayerfully somebody learned something out of this. Stop this killing.
I spoke with some other people in that community where the mass shooting happened. They were around the area that day. They remember hearing those gunshots and having to duck for cover. Today, they're thankful this 18-year-old has been arrested, thankful that justice may finally be served, and hopeful that he will get the help that he needs.
Help?
Right there.
The killer gets the help that he needs?
Well, the white guy,
is that right?
It's a hate crime. Yeah, you heard that right. So the white guy, again, I'm just trying to present what the news says before someone says I'm caping for anything. What did the family call the white guy? And what did the news reporter say?
The white guy is a monster, but the black kid is just a victim and he needs to get help. After he murdered people, after he was caught with drugs and a scale, so he's a dealer. He's a drug dealer.
Yeah, they said he had cannabis, a bag of what was suspected to be cocaine, fentanyl, and then a digital scale in his car.
Oh, so he's just an all-around victim. He's just a victim. He just needs help. He just needs understanding.
Yeah.
Okay. Never mind the people that he killed. Never mind the people, that he's selling drugs to, helping to ruin the community some more. He's a victim. This poor boy needs help.
And here, let me do this. We had another flash mob in your neck of the woods at Brownsville gas station. And then we have the mayor's we have the mayor's response. And then I figured I have Sheila Jackson from Houston, the Democrat.
Yeah.
She talks about Juneteenth. And she's the woman who went up there and was a fucking idiot about arm braces. She's also the woman who she gave a speech and she said North and South Vietnam. She's talking about North and South Korea.
She's been around a long time. I remember her from the Clinton trials.
Yeah. Do you want me to do the Chicago thing first?
Yeah, let's see. In Bronzeville. Oh, okay. I know Bronzeville.
Anything you want to say about that?
No, Bronzeville is actually one of those neighborhoods. It's an old neighborhood, and they've got all these beautiful, and they're trying to rebuild it, and it's really, really trying to come up. But also in Bronzeville, there is a sketchy ass, dirty ass ghetto right there too. So.
Brownsville segregated like you always talk about Chicago is?
Bronzeville is like, okay, Bronzeville is black. It's a black neighborhood with a little bit of white people trying to gentrify it a little bit, but it's a black neighborhood. But like Chicago, like so many neighborhoods in Chicago, if you walk 3 blocks over, you're in the ghetto. So you've got these beautiful brownstones, and then you walk a few blocks over, and it's the hood.
Let's see what the hood did.
Okay.
Another teen takeover last night, this time in Bronzeville.
Hundreds of teenagers converged at a gas station at 31st and Michigan, looting the store and breaking windows. WGN's Julian Cruz joins us now with more. Julian?
Well, Ben and Lourdes, fortunately, nobody killed or seriously injured in the rampage, which happened about 9:30 last night, with hundreds of teens and young people creating what local residents describe as mischief and mayhem.
That was really horrible. They had ransacked the store.
Vanessa Boyd and other Bronzeville residents describing the
All right, so we got video. Okay.
a tumultuous scene last night at 31st and Michigan.
There was a whole bunch of kids out here, and they was all in the gas station. They were causing a mess.
I know as teenagers we made mistakes, but we have never done anything like this.
Hundreds of young people, according to witnesses, migrating from a lakefront gathering to 31st and Michigan.
So what do you think about this?
This is going to be summer in Chicago. I'm gonna see these stories every weekend in Chicago for the whole summer. This is what's going to be happening. This is going to be every single weekend. We got a whole bunch of these kids, that have been out of control since the pandemic, and they're just getting worse.
Sisters, come get your kids.
They ain't getting these kids, and you know what? These mammies ain't doing nothing with these kids. Nothing. They just wild. Nobody can control them.
And when DZ said that you're going to start seeing places not taking Section 8 or housing vouchers, or she played that video of the white guy who was giving rentals, and as soon as he sees a rental where they say they have a boyfriend, he just disregards it completely.
Good. Yeah. Good. You know, it's hard not to take Section 8 in Chicago because, you know, everybody takes Section 8 here in Chicago. It's, you know, it's, but
Well, yeah, Obama said you had to.
right. I don't believe you have to. If you don't want these people in your, I would be very cautious. Now, I am a landlord myself.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I'm a landlord myself, and you can bet I know who I would rent to. I'm very lucky. The people that are my renters, you know, awesome people. But if I had to rent to somebody with Section 8, I'd be very wary. I don't know if I would do it, just because I wouldn't want the trouble.
So in your own way.
My house.
So in your own way, you're redlining.
You know what? You can call it what you want, but I know I'm not. I know who I'm not gonna let destroy my property.
Right.
I don't care who they are, but I also know who to look for. And yeah, if I saw, like, you know, a really nice Black woman with her boyfriend, hard pass. Hard pass. Moving along.
Throwing trash everywhere.
The crowd blocking traffic and in a few instances even climbing up on startled motorists' hoods before windows were broken out at this nearby BP gas station. These photographs showing the aftermath of what witnesses say was dangerous loot.
And then how do those aldermen and people complain when Walmart leaves?
Because there's no accountability. I mean, can you imagine? Look what they did there. Just destroyed it for shits and giggles.
Oh, I told you, I had friends' cars set on fire and businesses beaten and friends beaten in Philly during 2020 with Walter Wallace. And when I go on panels and I try to talk to people, I get two responses. I get rioting is the language of the unheard, or they got insurance.
You know, I've heard that, and I think to myself, okay, I have seen the result. I have seen the long-term result of rioting when people tear up their own neighborhoods and it never gets rebuilt. So what are you actually proving?
Well, Chicago has the first Walgreens, right? Should we bring that up too after these two? Chicago has the first Walgreens where you walk in and it's a wall and
Yeah.
you order everything.
That's what they need. That's what,
Looting and
look,
destruction.
people in business are there to make money. And if people are out there like out of control, stealing everything, how are they going to stay in business? So you got to protect your property. And I'm sorry if it looks ugly, but it is ugly. It's either that or close up your store and go to a different neighborhood.
But the cycle will just repeat.
Yeah. Hey. And then you're going to say, oh, but we don't have this in our neighborhood. Yeah, because look what you did to it. Yeah. My dad owned a liquor store on the south side of Chicago for many years. And when he finally retired because the neighborhood was taken over by crack and it wasn't worth him keeping it open. It was just too dangerous. So he sold it to somebody else.
That's racist.
You know, everything is racist. The moon is racist.
Yeah.
Chicago police called to disperse the crowd.
It was about 150 police people walking on bikes, detective cars. There was a bunch of them.
Local residents in a state of shock, wondering how and why this happened.
I've been here 22 years now.
Oh yeah.
And like I said, I ain't never seen it like this.
I always sit back and wonder, what are the parents doing?
It needs to be in each community.
But did all these black people, didn't they vote for Lightfoot and Johnson and Kim
Yes.
Fox?
Yes.
Well, what?
They don't make a connection. They do not make a connection with who they vote for and what they get. Somehow they think magically voting is they're going to vote their way out of poverty. They're going to vote their way into, like, whatever they believe is justice. That's what they believe. But what do they get? They get the same old, same old. You end up just getting these politicians who are like, pocketing money, grifting all over the place. Nothing happens. You just, a few wheels get greased in the black community and that's it. But nothing really happens. Nothing ever happens. These politicians never do anything.
Well, speaking of the mammy in charge, let's hear what Mayor Johnson has to say.
Was hospitalized after a hit-and-run crash in Bronzeville. It happened last night near 31st in Michigan. The young woman said she was crossing the road when she was hit by a gray vehicle that took off. So far, no one's been arrested. Meanwhile, we've reached out to police to find out if that crash is connected to this, a sometimes unruly crowd of teens in the same area at the...
I just love how they can't just say black. Black teens.
No, you can't say that.
Are they black? Are they black?
I'm looking at that picture and I see a whole lot of darkness.
Same time.
You
can see the group outside a gas station.
See them dancing?
Yeah, because they're having a good time.
You can see the group outside a gas station as well as a lot of police officers. There were reports of vandalism to the business and several cars. Today, when asked about this latest so-called teen takeover.
Yeah, and I like how this doesn't show that picture of the store. You notice that?
Mm-hmm.
They try to shush it away. And when this gas station closes down, well, let's play the Walmart video before we go to the Candace one, because I think that's a fair point to bring up, because this is what this leads to.
Mayor Brandon Johnson said the city is actively working to prevent these gatherings.
For several weeks, you have not heard any incident in the news about these congregants because we have been working strategically with law enforcement along with...
So what happened last night?
Yeah.
So what happened?
They were probably protecting downtown. There's probably a pretty good police presence downtown and like in all the touristy spots and all the money spots, but that's not a money spot. Not a real money spot.
Right. And because they're losing police, the police can't be everywhere. And then when the police are there, they can't arrest anybody.
No.
It's going to lead, it's going to lead to a confrontation. It's going to lead to either the black teens get so rambunctious, they start attacking police officers, and the police officers are going to respond. And I'm not even going to say it's going to be correct. I'm saying that at that point, the police just might be so tired of it that they might over respond. Like the guy who was shot, who was driving down the highway and fired a shot out the car. And then when he ran out the car, 8 police officers shot him like 80 times,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what to say. It's like you were weaving in and out of traffic. You fired at the police officers while you're driving. And then when you get out of the car, you turn and you point a gun at 8 cops. And in the heat of the moment, everybody expects like this unbelievable precise control, but it's like you were driving and you opened fire at other cars on the road. They're going to assume that you're gonna. I don't know what to say. Like I don't know what everyone's mad about.
It's like every time you hear somebody say, "Okay, when the police shot at this person, why couldn't they just shoot them in the leg?"
Yeah, that's dumb. That doesn't work.
No, the police are trained to shoot at the largest mass possible, which is the torso. They're not going to wing you in the leg. This isn't some movie. This isn't Annie Oakley with her gun.
Yeah. You can't tell people who don't know about. Tell me you don't know anything about guns by telling me you don't know anything about. Yeah.
Other preventative agencies to redirect these individuals who in some instances don't mean us any good.
Mayor Johnson acknowledged that the city and law enforcement can do better to keep these crowds under control or to stop them from congregating in the first place.
I don't know how they can stop them from congregating because Chicago is a big ass city. I mean, unless they're going to bring in the National Guard and like patrol these neighborhoods, I don't know how they're going to do it. Chicago's a big city. I mean, are the police going to like, you know, start going online and seeing who's live streaming and then like, oh yeah, go send some squad cars over there. And we've lost, and we have had a lot of police officers quit or retire. So we're short.
Yeah, you're going to run out of cops.
Hmm?
You're going to run out of cops. Here, this is the Walgreens. Did you see this?
Let's see it.
Experience. Walgreens just unveiled a radical redesign of its location in the South Loop. There are just 2 aisles and nearly all the merchandise is being kept out of sight. CBS 2's Suzanne Lemonnier takes us there and shows us what shoppers are saying about it.
It's billed as a better Walgreens. This South Loop Walgreens is at 2 East Roosevelt Road. It looks much different than your regular Walgreens. You can still buy snacks, drinks, and vitamins off the shelf. Customers can also pick up items they've ordered online, but most products are out of sight. Walgreens calls this a digital-first experimental store.
Whoa, so this is totally different. No big displays or checkout counters.
Walgreens created this Instagram post touting the new location at Roosevelt and State.
It's like a mini Walgreens, so you can just pop in, get what you need, and then hit self-checkout.
The things you don't see on the shelves, like cosmetics, alcohol, and gift cards, can only be purchased through this touchpad kiosk. Those items are in a store fulfillment area. It's off limits to those who are shopping. Once ordered, the customer can pick the items up from an employee at a counter specifically for kiosk and online orders.
It's just a really different setup.
Walgreens says digital shopping here is all about customer convenience. Well, those we spoke with said they really prefer shopping the traditional way.
So I think it kind of takes away that like browsing element that I like with shopping. And also sometimes I'm just in a rush and I don't want to wait for somebody else to grab things for me.
I didn't know where anything was. I didn't know where to go to check out, who I needed to talk to get what I needed to do.
I mean, are all these people surprised?
I don't know why.
Why is it always it always seems like it's a fucking surprise. Like, we just
They're
showed you
always
what this
surprised
kid's...
there's a consequence. They're shocked. There's a consequence. Like, what did you think was going to happen? These people they're trying to stay in business and not have everything stolen out from under them.
And let me play this real fast because you know someone's going to say, "Big time, you're lying about the kids twerking after the shooting in Willowbrook."
Chicago police officers responding to reported shooting this weekend were met with twerking and taunts as they tried to disperse the crowd.
No loitering. Please disperse. No loitering. Please disperse.
So I mean, I'm just going to be honest. I don't know why these white cops stay. They must score on the personality test. They must have more of the loyalty or the order. But I mean, I don't. You know, when your mayor throws you under the bus and Kim Fox throws you under the bus, and then the people you're trying to save throw you under the bus, it's like, what do you say?
You know, I don't know. I know a lot of cops. I know a lot of cops.
Like, how old is this girl? Look how skinny she is. Is she 12 or 13? Look how skinny she is. Like, how old are these kids?
These are young people. These are very young.
Like 13?
I'm gonna say teenage. I don't know if they're 13 now. They look a bit. The one in
15?
pink. They're teens. I think they're teens.
So that and these are the shorts they wear.
Yeah. Yeah, it's ass out. It's summertime.
I just wanted to show that. You know how I am. If I say something, someone will always come in your comments. Oh, well, you're lying. That didn't happen. Okay. All right, let's get to it. You want to start with the Candace Owens one then?
Yeah, let's see what Ms. Owens says. I have for her, I feel like it's like I don't want to like her, but sometimes she's really on point. And sometimes she's just really on point. It's like, but she's annoying too. But sometimes she's really on point. I mean, she was on point with George Floyd.
Did you and BLM when she got the tax returns, right?
She was on point with it.
Oh.
You know what? She's more right than she is wrong, even though in the beginning I thought she was like extremely disingenuous. Because how can you change your opinion? How can you do a 180 so quickly? But you know what? It is what it is. And she, like I said, I believe she's more right than she is wrong.
All right, you want to go through some of this video?
Yeah, let's see what Ms. Owens has to say.
Okay. Also, let me add, did you hear that Daily Wire, all its creators just got strikes on YouTube?
We knew that was coming. And
Yeah.
they said it was coming. Matt Walsh,
All
all
the-
of them, they all said it was coming.
I think Daily Wire is a neoconservative fake opposition website
Mhm.
because we found out that Shapiro pays millions of dollars to YouTube to allow his ads and his services to, it's like how do you promote being the opposition when you pay the supposed opposition millions of dollars, so your ads come up first and you're allowed to promote everything. They're neocons, but all the videos that got pulled were interviews with kids who had detransitioned. Isn't that interesting?
You know what? Yeah, of course. Because here comes the censorship. Sorry. Here comes
no
the
problem. You
censorship.
okay?
Yeah. Sorry. Allergies.
Yeah.
Here comes the censorship. You cannot go against the party line when it comes to the alphabet community.
I played an interview. That was the first thing I played for You Came On for 11 minutes. If you want to check it out, it's Chloe Cole. And she gave an 11-minute interview to Jack Posobiec. And the video has been taken down now off Twitter. It's been made private. She didn't take it down, but she received a lot of backlash. Yeah, it was a girl, precocious puberty. She was given hormones at 13 and a double mastectomy at 16. And now she found out that she's sterile. Yeah.
Sterile. Yeah, of course, sterile.
Yeah.
Well, they
Okay.
just had oh my gosh. I just read that there was this one guy who was one of the lead people, transitioning children, like giving them the puberty blockers and all the rest of that. He finally came out and said, hey, this is what we were doing, and these are some of the consequences. And we were wrong. He's talking about how these blockers affect the hypothalamus, which controls, sexual attraction, which controls so much stuff that makes us human. But you're blocking that in these very young children these very young teens who are still developing. So what are you actually doing to these kids? They don't know, just experimenting.
We'll have to. Well, it's mammon too. It's money.
Oh, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Medicine equals money.
Mark Dice has an interesting video where he says, this is one thing they don't like about Robert Kennedy. He published a study from Berkeley in 2019 where they were talking about children being exposed to atrazine, especially boys. There's a higher probability it makes them gay because it increases their testosterone, their estrogen. And he was saying it affects a certain gene in the hypothalamus chemically. And he's saying we noticed that boys today have lower levels of testosterone, but it seems like the basic answer would just be just give them some testosterone.
Right.
Why do you give them the opposite? So he's going towards more of a nefarious conclusion.
Yeah, like what are you actually what are you actually intending on doing to these kids? What's your real outcome?
Oh, it's depopulation.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I was talking to someone about that. Like we were talking about our family in like World War II.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather served in World War II in the Navy, and it was like I read stories of people in World War I and men in World War I, World War II, where they were shot multiple times, but they were still able to do things. And when I look at the testosterone difference of what they were able to do and what they were able to physically handle, and then the suspicion is that there's all this atrazine and these chemicals. Like this Mark Dice video was showing that there are these chemicals being pumped in the water in a lot of like red states where it makes the boys have a lower testosterone. And what would the purpose of that be? Well, a boy with less testosterone is more submissive, right? More obedient, less likely to rebel or go against the grain, or which are the qualities of a leader?
More malleable.
Right.
You know, control the masses.
Yeah.
That's a biggie. That's a big biggie. You know what? But you can see the difference between so many younger men and so many of these older men. Because some of these old men, they look like they're made out of freaking iron.
Yeah.
You know, I don't remember your grandfather was in, World War II. My father was in World War II. And those guys were made out of freaking iron. You could cut off a damn arm and they would still go to work.
Yeah, my grandfather was a plumber.
Yeah. These guys, I don't see that nowadays. I rarely see that. And I definitely don't see it here in Chicago. I don't see it. I see men who look like they have boobs and hips. If you look for a masculine man in Chicago, you're going to be looking for a minute. You know, there was a whole discussion in this women's group, and they were saying how conservative women are considered more attractive, more conventionally attractive and feminine. And then they talked to liberal women, and liberal women said conservative men were more masculine and attractive.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah.
I guess we're all going to be sneaking across the tracks, huh? But let's see what Miss Owens has to say.
Yeah, let's watch this and break it down.
Okie doke.
Everybody had a very relaxing day off. Bad news for me. Apparently, I have been banned from the Black community again. I've been told that I am not invited to the various cookouts. And the reason why is because I was tweeting and I said something along the lines of Juneteenth is ghetto and it's made up. And people were very upset about that. And I would like to just right off the bat apologize for what I said. And I'm going to tell you why I do feel compelled to apologize for that tweet. Plus, later on in the show, we're going to be discussing Andrew Tate. He has now been indicted for human trafficking. And the case is kind of crazy. They seem relieved by the indictment. All that and more today coming up on Candace Owens.
I don't want to get popped, so I'm just trying to be careful.
As baseball player, the Chosen series and the Pride flag debacle, the Duggar that is idiotic, not because of the color of their skin. But again, that BLM rot, it takes a while for it to recede. And there were other people that took issue with the fact that I used the term ghetto. Oh, no. You can't say ghetto and a Black issue, a Black person, or a Black holiday in the sentence unless you are being racist. And this is what they tend to do, right?
Is that correct?
You know,
For fair use, we got to do commentary, so I got to stop it and hit
okay.
it.
You know, when she used that word, she knew she was saying something inflammatory. She knew it. She was doing it to get a rise out of people. And yeah, if you associate the word Black, you know, with ghetto, of course you're going to get a rise out of people. You're going to get a rise out of people because that's the stereotype. She knows it. She knows what she's doing. You know what? She's not a brilliant woman, but she can, you know, hit the nail on the head. She knows what she's doing. It keeps her profile up to say something like that. But you know what? And I was thinking when she said Juneteenth is a made-up holiday, aren't they all? Literally, I just learned about Juneteenth about maybe 10 years ago. I never heard of it. And my father's family is from Texas. I'm torn on the holiday part of it because I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't really have a real opinion, but I see that what it's shaking out to be is a barbecue and bullets holiday, and I don't like that.
Yeah, that's what she talks about. Keep going.
Yeah.
They basically say you can't use words like perversity and pedophilia when talking about gay people or lesbians because of the history of the word, and it's somehow homophobic to do that, even when you have a clear case of a gay person that is doing something perverse or pedophilic. They try to ban the words that actually make sense in the context that you were talking about by saying that the word itself is problematic.
And I think Michigan is now passing laws to go against hate speech. They're creating a false concept to punish you.
I used the vocabulary words that were at my dispense, right? I was talking about ghetto as an adjective. They knew what I was referring to, the colloquial term of ghetto behavior, because that's what I meant. When people take this day off, when they are celebrating for whatever reason, they think celebrating Black freedom, it somehow means that they're allowed to get ghetto. So let's address that. Let's just take a look around the United States and see how they celebrated. Here's the first example that we have of how some Black American young children, it looks to be like they're in their teens, tweens, celebrated at a McDonald's. Take a listen. Look at these workers. Kids are now jumping over the register. The workers are hiding. They look like they're terrified. They're now trying to pull the register out. They're kicking the register out. Juneteenth, y'all.
They're not even see. Oh, they taking the register.
Yep, they've taken the register.
Those are all
They
young
now
teenagers.
running out of the McDonald's.
Yeah, they're young. Let's get to so then she goes to the shooting in Roseland, but it's the statistics she pulls up that I really want to cover. She pulls up these crime statistics that I'm sure nobody will like.
100 people. So yeah, how is that for a celebration? I want to be very clear.
There you go. So 100 injured, 12 dead over Juneteenth weekend. And I think 75 of those were in Chicago.
Yeah. I forgot how many we had. Was it 60 or it was 60 plus. I know that. I know that.
It's
plus.
40, 22 at Willowbrook, 6 at Roselawn, and 40 plus in Chicago city limits.
Yeah.
So that's at least 60 plus.
Yeah, 60 plus. Yeah.
So over half of that was in one city.
It's Chicago.
Yeah.
Watch these videos.
If
and I
it's the
see
weekend, that's
these
what they do.
kids
Especially in the summer.
and these children twerking on top of whatever that was, a Pizza Hut. I feel bad for these young adults because crime as a celebration, this ghetto culture that we're seeing, it's not exactly Black America's fault if you think about it. I feel bad for them because over the last 4 years or so, the media and the corporations in lockstep, just like McDonald's, signaled to these individuals that their deviant behavior was justified.
What do you think?
You know, see, when I listen to Candace, I listen to her, like it's like my mind is like I'm listening to her with two different things going on. I'm listening to her because I know what she's doing. Okay. I know that this woman is disingenuous, but she's not completely wrong. You know, these, you know, with BLM and all the rest of the stuff and some of the psychology in the Black community, when these kids act up and do all of this stuff, it's not condemned. It's almost celebrated. You know, like
Can I add one thing to that?
Yeah,
You see
yeah.
this? Who dat?
Right. Remember that? That was
Who dat?
such a joke. That was such a joke. And I was like, you guys need to stop all this performative bullshit. That was a joke. Let's stop that. Let's stop that nonsense. Okay.
There's Pelosi. There's Chuck
Yeah.
Schumer.
Like kneeling with ticket cloth. Like, stop it.
Sheila Jackson's
Stop
in
it.
there.
Stop it. Oh. I'm gonna throw up in my mouth. Stop. I hate that kind of performative, acting.
So when Candace says everybody embraces it, she's not wrong.
She's not wrong. She's not wrong. That's what I'm saying. She may be disingenuous, but she's not wrong. This was like the whole, I remember when all of this happened, and it was so disgusting. I was like, you guys really need to stop this, because it was just so performative. And them elevating George Floyd up as a freaking like saint and all of that. I'm like, this is the best you can come up with to find an example to show people who to admire. Oh, that's summer.
And I always do this whenever we mention Floyd. Aracely Enriquez. Say her name. That's the woman who in Houston, he pretended to be a member of the water company and broke in her home and put a gun to her stomach. That's George Floyd.
That's the one
That's her name.
Used to.
Yeah.
And President Biden told his daughter, your father is going to change the world. These are the examples of Blackistan. These are the examples for Dusties. This is what they teach them. This is the morality. And you wonder why Black people are walking around acting like they don't have a damn sense of, really, what is your purpose to do all of this? Do you just want to stay at the bottom of society with everything all the time? That's what they hold up as an example to admire. And then you wonder why you got 16-year-old girls twerking in front of a police car because they think they're doing something revolutionary, and Black kids tearing up a McDonald's because they think it's fun. Isn't this what we do now? BLM, just riot all over the place and tear shit up. Really?
I like BLM, which is buy large mansions.
Didn't they get rich?
Yeah. And then remember when Patrice Cullors said that filing your taxes was white supremacy?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. She don't want the IRS in her business, right?
Well, the IRS isn't going to show up to her house with long guns, but they'll come to my house.
Yeah, they will.
Because she black.
You know what?
Well, she black.
I
They all
have
the people who work at the IRS are woke.
I don't know
They
about
woke.
that because I've seen the IRS lock up a whole lot of black people and do it with flourish.
Well, rappers don't pay taxes. You got to get a good accountant, you know. Just like what's the rapper's name? Boozy.
Mm-hmm.
Boozy got in trouble because in the car he has a 15-year-old killer in prison. And Boozy was being interviewed. He said, some guy was interviewing him. How real are you? If there's a gun in the car, what do you do? And Boise said, oh, well, the youngest guy takes the rap.
Because those are the examples. Those are the examples of black men. That's what they teach. Dusties. That's what they teach each other. That's the culture. That's the sense of morality that they have. And these are the people that they look up to.
I keep going.
Yeah.
All right.
We saw this all across America. Are you upset? Do you have a feeling? Loot a Target, grab a flat screen TV. Are you happy? Are you celebrating? Get you and your homies together for a cookout and be sure to have some shootouts. This is normal. This is totally normal behavior. We're not going to talk about it, by the way, because it's black on black crime. We only talk about it in the extraordinary circumstance that it's a white individual that shoots a black person, even though that circumstance, like I said, does not happen nearly as much as black on black crime because nobody wants to talk about it. We don't want to fix anything. So what actually is Juneteenth? That's a very good question. And one, by the way, that every major news organization feels compelled to try to answer every time the holiday comes up. I'm not kidding. The Wall Street Journal, CNN, the Washington Post, CBS, you name it. Everyone has to task a reporter with writing an article to explain what Juneteenth is, because apparently nobody really knows exactly what it is. I mean, take this tweet from Charlie Kirk describing that phenomenon right off the bat.
And I hate Charlie Kirk, but even a broken clock is right twice a day, you know?
Right.
He wrote, people sure do get riled up when you tell them the truth about Juneteenth. Did you know, according to Gallup, on the eve of it becoming a federal holiday, 60% of Americans knew little or nothing about Juneteenth. Joe Biden didn't post a single tweet about Juneteenth until 2019. We created a new National Independence Day because we allowed a bunch of Marxists to morally blackmail the American public post George Floyd. Screaming racist doesn't change the facts. And there.
What do you think of that?
I don't think he's wrong. Because, like, didn't I just say, I just found out about Juneteenth about 5 years ago, and my family were slaves in Texas at the time. So, yeah, I don't believe most Americans knew anything about it. And I think they did rush this holiday through to kind of placate the whole BLM community. Here, give them something. Give them a little something. They like to barbecue. Give them a holiday.
But Biden also ran on giving HBCUs $50 billion, and then he cut it back down to 2.
Oh, yeah. Once he got in there, he was like, oh, yeah, we're going to have to redo this math.
Yeah. Got to send it to Ukraine.
Woo!
From my perspective, I've been to a couple different colleges, and I was a student at Temple University, and I was also a student at Community College of Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I went, they were both woke, but they're woker now.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we've had a lot of back and forth about Jason Wingard, the recent black president who wanted to live on Temple's campus, like the mayor in Chicago at Cabrini Green.
Mm-hmm.
It does all publicity bullshit. When I went to those 2 woke college, they were woke at the time, not like super woke now, but I'm just saying that for the time I went in the early 2000s and the 2010s, I never heard of Juneteenth. And both of those colleges were very pro-black.
Yeah. because it was something that it was like, it wasn't okay. I can tell you right now, it really wasn't celebrated up north here. We didn't know about it. We didn't bring that information with us. It wasn't a big deal. We didn't know about it. We found out about it with you all.
I mean, to me, like a holiday is kind of like a nationality. It's one of those things where if you're into it and it means something to you, that's fine. And if you're not into it, that's fine. Like I'm like, or like a religion. Like I'm trying to be a better Christian, or I guess I go to a Protestant church, and they're pretty based. They don't even like they don't even like the presidential election because they said they treat presidents like gods, which
They do. They do.
Yeah. So Protestants have some I like some of their core principles.
I'm a Protestant. I happen to be a United Methodist.
Oh, okay. Well, but again, like with how they suck on crime. They're terrible. I told you that my pastor was trying to send 11-year-old kids to Philly, but it's one of those things where I'm not going to like preach to you for 24/7 about how Jesus loves you. You know, I'm at the point where it's like, you got to figure that out for yourself. Like I'll tell you it, but you know, and that's on you. I have my own family to worry about. I got 2 kids and a wife. All time not with them is time I lose.
True. Very true.
And the way things are going and the way men are portrayed, I need to be as strong and as buff and as big and as influential as I can, because I want to be an example for my children. You know what I mean?
And your children need that. That's what's missing in so much of family life nowadays, that fathers are no longer these strong figures.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like, if you see Juneteenth and if you see it as this celebration of a history, and one person could even argue that Juneteenth happened. Like, I know DZ talks about Sky Daddy.
Yeah.
And then I don't remember the name, if it's Kyra or Ebony. I don't remember which one is the Christian. But some people could argue that Juneteenth has a more significance because it happened. Some people would say it actually, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't there, but it happened.
But it's not even real because it's not true. Okay, here. I'm going to tell you what I know about Juneteenth. Okay.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And the reason why I say it's not true. Okay. What happened after the slaves were free? The owners in Texas just didn't convey the message to their slaves, and everybody just kept on working. Eventually the union gets down there, and word spreads, and people are like, oh, we're free. What, 2.5 years later we're free? Okay, so that's Juneteenth. But that's not, and it's supposed to be a celebration when slavery actually ended in the United States, but that's not true because we still had slavery in certain places in America for years afterwards. So slavery did not end in Texas when they found out about it on Juneteenth. It continued on. So it's also a disingenuous holiday. I don't know the date that slavery actually ended. The last slaves were freed in the United States. I don't know the actual date, but it wasn't Juneteenth and it wasn't in Texas.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's like yeah, interestingly enough, I was listening to a panel last night, and I promise this is a connection to what you're saying about history. It was interesting because on this panel they had a white British guy, and then remember that Iranian we were covering in the speech the other day?
Yeah,
who lives in London?
Mm-hmm.
He was on the panel as well, and him and the white Londoner. Well, they call themselves. I don't know how it works. They call themselves British, but behind both of them, they were using DOS, and they had the Union Jack. They had the British flag, right, like in their background. And then, interestingly enough, this black British guy born in London said he found the flag offensive. And so it was this interesting dynamic where the white Londoner, like white skin, and then the Iranian Londoner, they saw the flag and they had like a sense of nationalism. And the black Londoner didn't see the flag he saw it as an oppressive symbol. And then the Iranian guy said he pulled up the Jamaican flag. And he asked the black Londoner, he said, "What do you think of this flag?" And he said, "What do you think of the Afro-Caribbean festival where black people walk around with this Jamaican flag?" And the black Londoner said, "Do you even know why we have the festival? It's because we had the riots in 1964. And then I chatted in the chat and I said, yeah, well, if we're going to go back in history, who started the riots in 1909 in Cardiff and Liverpool? It was the race riots in 1909. That was the reason that in World War II, Britain didn't want to give black soldiers citizenship. And they didn't want to, and before we go down that path, they didn't want to give Australians citizenship. They didn't want to give Indians citizenship, but primarily African Americans after the 1909 race riots, they didn't want to, so it's like, and what's interesting is that the black Londoner didn't know what happened in 1909, but he knew what happened in 1964. And there's a video I watched and the guy literally when you say you don't know the history, this guy made a video pulling up newspaper articles from 1910 and 1908 from the London newspapers. And he had to pay a guy like in Iceland. And what he does is he actually puts the reel at the bottom. So he tells you exactly where he got it. And what we see something we see now. After World War I, there was a large amount of African-American soldiers who were working the docks in Cardiff and Liverpool. And an interesting thing about working the docks was you would get your day's pay that day. Right? So what you had was you had soldiers who probably for the first time in their life in a white country were making an equal amount of money to other white people. And a lot of these soldiers were known to frequent like Maltese cafes where they had prostitution. And another thing that you see in a lot of these newspaper reports is that these African soldiers were quick to turn fistfights into like death matches.
Yeah.
Like you can't, like the British kind of had a code back in the 1900s that if you got in a fist fight, you would just use your fists. But it was, but we would see in newspaper article after newspaper article after newspaper article that the Africans would resort to bringing out knives or switchblades or even pistols. And ultimately what happened was a man was slashed by Africans. And when the police chased the Africans into one of the warehouses they were all sleeping in, these 4 police officers chased them in. They opened fire at the police officers with revolvers. And the British were more homogenous at that time, so they started throwing bricks and birch beer bottles through the windows at the Africans. And that's what led to the riots. And ultimately in the riots, 5 people were killed. A Jamaican black guy, an Indian, and 3 white guys, or 3 British. And it's because of those riots that there was never really any plan for black soldiers to remain after World War II. And London always gets this credit for like, oh, we're more progressive. We never had to have a civil rights thing. And yes, there were bars and places in London that they actually preferred black soldiers over white soldiers. But there was never any point in time where London was going to be like, oh, no, you can totally stay here.
Right.
That wasn't gonna happen. That wasn't gonna happen.
Right. You can visit, but you can't stay.
Yeah. And I'm just I said all that to say off of your point. They won't let you. Why won't they let you find these newspaper reels in London? This guy had to pay some guy from Iceland to get them.
Yeah.
And
What's with the censorship?
Right. The pattern is they would elevate to a violent altercation. And yeah, so anyway, my tangent's over. Should I keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
And if I'll tell you what, if you ever want, we can go over that video. That video is terrifying.
You know,
with the
that
newspaper clips.
actually that sounds really interesting because I think like I don't make too many videos because I'm just so busy. But one of the videos I made, I talk about my stepfather who was in World War II, who was stationed in England. So that's interesting to me. But keep
Here,
going.
I'll keep playing this one.
Yeah.
I'll keep playing this one, but I'll pull that up while this is playing.
Okay.
There it is. That is the truth that Black Americans do not want to address. Why on earth did we mint a new federal holiday? There hasn't been a new federal holiday minted since 1983, since before I was born. And that holiday was MLK Jr. Day. Since then, nothing. But then suddenly, in 2021, when the Democrats get back into power and Joe Biden is president, the first thing that they do is they mint Juneteenth as a holiday following a year of racial unrest. Because what is Juneteenth? It's BLM as a consolation prize. It's Democrats saying, I know we've just used you for 4 years while we were not in power to riot, to loot, to cause disturbances, to burn down billions of dollars of private property, to burn down your own neighborhoods. Now, before you wake up to the fact that we keep using you emotionally, that we kept the race narrative at the forefront, and we wanted you to loot and riot during the George Floyd riots, and the magic of the money that disappeared, the millions upon millions of dollars that were given for Black Americans that you guys are never going to see, before you start to realize that that's pretty shady, that we might have had something to do with it, let us first offer you this consolation prize. Here's Juneteenth. Thank you, Black Americans, for doing our bidding for 4 years while we weren't in power. Now we're back in power, and you can shut up, okay? Don't.
What do you think about that?
Okay, like I said, when I listened to her with two different mindsets. I think that she's in the ballpark, but she's not on the money with her analysis. I think Juneteenth was some kind of backroom deal, some kind of consolation prize to like, okay, Black people, y'all can calm down. That here's a new holiday for you, and to sort of placate, that whole community. I think it was some kind of backroom deal because who the hell heard of it? I'm Black and I didn't hear of it.
Right.
And like I said, and it's not even a real holiday. It's a fake holiday. It's not even true. So yeah, I think that she's in the ballpark. I think she's really in the ballpark, but not quite on the money. But she's in the ballpark. She's not wrong.
So she's only addressing it from a political angle. She's not addressing it from a Black cultural angle.
Okay.
Or a dusty angle.
She's not addressing it from a dusty angle. Okay, because they don't know it, but they don't know anything about no damn Juneteenth either. Okay, they just, like I said, it's the barbecue and bullets holiday. That's what it is now. That's Blackistan's holiday, celebrated with barbecue and bullets and twerking. So, like I said, she's in the ballpark. She kind of gets it. She's not quite there because I am so sorry. I don't want to insult this woman, but I'm going to insult this woman. This is not the brightest bulb in the damn chandelier. She's ambitious and she knows what notes to hit to make money. Okay, but she's not the brightest bulb. She's
Right.
giving you like a really good analysis.
Right. Controlled opposition.
Yeah.
I say this all the time about Charlie Kirk. Like, Turning Point USA amasses millions of dollars and he keeps going to college after college after college, and they hate him. They won't let him talk. They shut down his speeches. And Turning Point and Republicans are not allowed to open chapters at these colleges. Kind of like at the Harrisburg Community College, you're not allowed to have a white group or you're a European group, but you're allowed to have everything else. So the question becomes, why do you keep going to the colleges? Why don't you just build your own fucking college? You know the problem, but it seems like they want to pretend to do something.
Yeah.
They want to post videos about, oh, let's own the libs, and the libs are well, your own people are being kicked out of school everywhere, but you keep making millions of dollars. But the grift seems to be, we're going to keep pretending to do something.
Right.
And we're going to keep letting the other side have more and more control of academia. This is why CNN and everybody freaked the fuck out when DeSantis went to that major university in Florida where they had 13 people on the college board, and DeSantis reached out with his hand and plucked 6 liberals off the board and placed 6 conservatives on the board, one of them being Christopher Rufo. And then he canceled that African-American honors course. But I downloaded the course, and there's all this queer and gender studies stuff in it. There's all this abolish the police and abolish prisons, and like this fascination with the Weather Underground.
Oh, it's been a long time since I went to college. What?
Right. It's this like, and he was asking, like, what does queer studies have to do with African American history?
Yeah, because do you have any idea how homophobic the Black community is?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, we could just look at places like Uganda and Liberia. Obama went to Liberia and tried to gay rights, and they were looking at him like, look, man, what do you want? You want us to arrest the entire country? Well, here, she gets into the stats.
Okay.
And then I did pull up that other video if you want to see some of the stuff about UK.
Call us, we'll call you. And trust me, they never do call us, do they? They never do call us. We just accept it. We keep moving on.
It's like, to me, she keeps laying the blame on the Democrats and not laying the blame on the Black community. Does it kind of seem that way?
Yeah. Because she's not talking about, look, the Black community to her. How can I say? Okay, let me see if I can formulate my thoughts.
Automatons?
She doesn't really care about the Black community. The Black community is just a means to an end for her to get attention so she can do her grift. If she could make the same money and she could target one of the Latino communities, she would. But the market's not there for her to do that. She's a Black woman, and she's picking up all of these, these talking points because she knows these talking points sell. She doesn't really want to talk to Black people at all. She's not. I don't know if she's divested. I don't know.
She has a white husband.
I know she has a white husband. I don't know if she's a swirler. I don't know what the hell she is. I don't think she's a divester, but I kind of think she is, but in her own very conservative, shy. Oh, I can't say that.
You can say whatever you want.
No, that was nasty. I wasn't gonna say. I'm not gonna say that. Okay. All
right.
This woman knows how to make money, and she's got a great subject that she can exploit. Is she really going to look deep into it? No, not so much, because she also knows her target audience is not the Black community. It is a different community who really isn't that educated on the Black community. So she's just kind of like,
So white conservatives?
Yeah, she's not talking to Black people. She's not doing any kind of in-depth analysis of what's going on in the Black community. She's just hitting the talking points
Not
that
like
is
DZ.
familiar.
Not like DZ.
Right. DZ gets in there. She gets in the muck and the mire.
Yeah.
Candace is just trying to give you just enough information about it to reinforce what you think you already know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, she's a conservative. That's what we call her.
Ooh, perfect. Bingo, bingo.
It-
ding, 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 ding.
It's a neocon. It's like the Republicans. It's like the GOP of Atlanta when Buckhead wanted to create their own municipality. And basically the GOP said, oh, that's racist. You don't need to be safe.
Right. They're not, because these people are not true believers. Okay. A true believer, I believe that DeSantis is a true believer. I mean, I think
he's already
not-
sold us
I
out
don't-
to Israel.
I'm waiting to get more information because he's still very provincial to me. I don't see. I'm not getting all about him.
Have you
But
seen the
he
pamphlet
seems
bill?
like a true believer.
Have you seen the pamphlet bill? He already sold and he's already took away First Amendment rights from Florida. He went to Israel and signed a bill. You're not allowed to promote certain religions or hand out pamphlets. So he's already implementing hate speech laws in Florida.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was a question I asked my pastor. I said, yeah, so if I'm a Christian or a Protestant, if I'm a Muslim, and then I go to another country and I sign and I put a yarmulke on my head, am I a traitor? And he said, yes. I said, so when Trump says he's a Catholic and then he goes to the Wailing Wall or the Weeping Wall in Israel and puts a yarmulke on his head to bow down to his masters, that's a betrayal, right? I mean, if I'm just being serious, who turned in my savior to the Romans?
Well,
Who were the money changers in the temple? Whose tables did he flip over?
oh, you know what? You're you skirting on thin ice, my friend.
In Galatians, what did he say? Neither Greek nor Jew.
But you have to pay homage over there because that's politics and it's money and it's
That's what
influence.
I'm falling into the third party position. I can't believe I'm saying that. I'm not for anarchy and I'm not a libertarian, but the uniparty just doesn't work.
I'm partyless. I'm partyless.
Yeah.
Now, and I'm very clear about that. I used to be a Democrat. I used to be a conservative Democrat. Now I'm not even that.
Oh, like a blue dog, like an old school liberal.
That was me, old school liberal. I was a conservative Democrat. So nowadays, when I try to listen to people, I end up listening to more like like the
Centrist.
Yeah, it's also vile, but I am partyless, and I wish I could find somebody that I would want to vote for, but the Democratic Party is completely corrupt. I would like them to babysit a cat.
I like Vivek because of his stance on our gun rights, but we should play that too. He went to Chicago and he was in a barber chair. Did you see that?
No.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot. We have a lot, but let's go through the crime stats, and then if you want, I can show you that video about the race riots in World War II.
Okay. Yeah, and let's see the crime stats, because you know what? She actually does bring good stats.
And we just somehow feel good about a stupid day being minted. Nobody asked the questions. What's going on with their neighborhoods? Why are we the most murderous group in America by a long shot? Why are we killing ourselves? Literally, this actually happened. The data reveals that Black Americans are responsible for the predominance of murder in all of the 65 most deadly cities except one. I went through the list this morning, right? And it has this list. It's broken up. We're going to put it up for you. And it tells you what the deadly U.S. city is. It tells you how many Black homicide offenders there were and how many white homicide offenders there were for the year of 2021 when we got Juneteenth. And I just went ahead and highlighted the ones where the white and Black populations is even is either split or it's majority white. Because if it's a majority black city, then you can argue, oh, okay, well, there's more black people in the city, so that's why we are more murderous.
And that's a typical argument on the left, right? So
Mhm.
argument on the left is the
Well,
arguments
it's a
they
black
use
city,
are,
so the stats are going to be more black people.
or they say that most crime is intra-racial.
Right.
It's another way to kind of like, where all people do it too.
Right.
Murderous. No. I went ahead and highlighted for you where the white population is more predominant, and yet we are still the most murderous, or when the population is split evenly. First up, the most murderous city, the deadliest U.S. city, is St. Louis, Missouri. That is a predominantly white population, 46.3% white, 44% black. 90 black homicide offenders versus just 12 white homicide offenders. Dayton, Ohio, predominantly white, 23 black homicide offenders versus 7 white homicide offenders. Richmond, Virginia, about an even split there, 45 to 44%. 54 black homicide offenders to just four white homicide offenders. North Charleston, South Carolina, that is 43% black population to a almost even 41.8% white population. Not an even split amongst the homicide offenders. Black homicide offenders, 28 to just 11 white homicide offenders.
Did you see Philadelphia?
Where's-
It's right at the bottom. It says 40% black pop, 38% white pop, 207 black homicides to 46.
And what you're going to hear to excuse those numbers, they're going to say, "Oh, but this is poverty crime. This is crime that poverty that caused these crimes. These are poor people acting out."
Oh, I have an answer to that. Don't worry. I
Okay.
already pulled up the video.
All right.
Columbia, South Carolina, majority white, 50% white to 40% black. Doesn't matter because the black homicide offenders are 21 versus 0 white.
And I wonder, are these all statistics from this year? They have to be statistics from this year, right? Because Philly had over 700 bodies, but only 560 or so were counted as homicides. So I'm saying when they have that 250, 60 number, that has to be this year.
Homicide offenders. Atlanta, Georgia. Now, this is 48% black versus 41% white population. In Atlanta, Georgia,
Shout out to DZ and Aaliyah because that's where they're from.
101 black homicide offenders versus just 1 white homicide offender.
Is that insane?
That is completely insane. But it's
Hotlanta.
Blackistan. It's Blackistan. What?
That's Hotlanta. Thank you.
Ooh, the HIV capital for Blackistan.
And syphilis.
Yeah.
Indianapolis, Indiana, majority white. 75 black homicide offenders versus 24 white homicide offenders. Little Rock, Arkansas, majority white. 46 black homicide offenders versus 3 white homicide offenders. Let me know if this is upsetting you, Juneteenth people that like to celebrate and pretend that we don't have real issues that we need to face and that this wasn't a consolation prize, because I'm not done yet. And I'm just going to go over the first page here. There's a whole second one. Basically tells us the exact same story. Chicago, Illinois. I am shocked to learn that that is actually a majority white population by a lot, 45% white versus 29% black. Despite this, the disparity, 152 black homicide offenders versus
26 white.
Sounds about
Oh,
right.
Thomas Sowell.
Sounds about right. That's because these ninjas are off
white
the chain.
homicide.
Well, yeah, nobody punishes them.
Offenders. Same in Chattanooga, Tennessee, majority white, 15 black homicide offenders to just 2 white homicide offenders. Buffalo, New York, majority white, 12 black homicide offenders versus 5 white homicide offenders. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, dead even split, 39% to 39%. not an even split amongst homicide offenders. 139 Black homicide offenders versus just 11 white homicide offenders. Lastly, we'll do Dallas, Texas. 53% white, overwhelming majority, versus just 24% Black population. Despite that, in Dallas, Texas, there are 180 Black homicide offenders in the year 2021 versus just 62 white homicide offenders in Dallas.
So these are 2021. Sounds like the 2021 statistics. Okay. So is this any surprise?
No, it's no surprise to me because look, the criminality. I mean, she's talking about the criminality, the murderous criminality. We know it's over the top in Blackistan. We know that. They are killing each other. You know what? Black men are the biggest danger to Black men. Black men are the biggest danger to Black women. And Black men just in society general. The freaking criminality. If you look at the statistics, if you actually look at it, you're like, oh, you know, but you can't look at it because it's racist. You cannot look at the truth. You cannot examine the truth because it's racist. You can't look at who's pointing the gun at you. You can't notice their color.
I'm hesitant to show you part of this video because I don't know if it get me a strike or it'll make you think I'm a terminology is now realist. I guess the term is race realist. But this guy makes videos on anti-white propaganda in video games.
Mm-hmm.
And he made this 2-hour-long video on the Call of Duty game, Call of Duty Vanguard.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to watch some of this about the UK stance and race during World War II?
Yeah.
All right. This channel is called American Krogan.
Paper, which is highly informative here. Although the British government officially didn't have a segregation policy, in 1942, when details about America's deployment of troops to the British Isles were being discussed, the British government actually worked to keep Black troops out of Britain entirely. Quote, in 1942, the government expressed discreet but firm opposition to U.S. plans to send Black troops to Britain. The British chiefs of staff told Washington in April that they did not favor the use of colored troops, but although supported by the U.S. Army Command in Britain, their preferences were overruled by the U.S. War Department, unquote. Ultimately, Black and white units in England were granted access to different towns on different days, and recreational events were held on different nights for different units. Yes, the Home Office and other entities instructed British officials not to enforce American policies directly, but this was likely due to imperial political concerns. The British authorities didn't wish to upset the colored personnel they had recruited from the empire or cause unrest in their colonies.
And here's one of the reasons I like this guy, because he puts the source right at the bottom and he highlights it. Do you want me to read this?
Yeah.
The presence of colored troops among the United States forces had given rise to some difficulties, but General Eisenhower was now proposing to segregate these troops in a limited number of areas where special arrangements would be made for them. So what we're hearing is that even though white and Black troops would be in the same town, they were given different times and different places to congregate on different days of the week.
Right, because they were still segregated.
Well, he's going to get into the riots.
Okay.
That's his reasoning. And I like this guy because he shows the newspaper clippings and he shows the source at the bottom of where he got it.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't seem like he's pulling it out of his butt, like we was Kangs, like a host.
Mm-hmm.
But I want someone else's opinion on this. So
At a time when they needed to draw on.
Invited the Minister of Information to continue to be responsible for the coordination of these arrangements, keeping in close touch with the Foreign Office on the political aspects of the question and consulting as necessary with Sir Findlater Stewart and the service departments, and asked him to report to the Lord President of the Council any dispute or difficulties which could not be overcome by his committee.
On their resources. One more cabinet memo stated the following, quote, But although it has been ruled that for the period of the present emergency, colored British subjects in this country are to be on the same footing as British subjects of pure European descent, as regards the grant of emergency commissions and entry into the armed forces, for obvious reasons, it is not desired to encourage colored British subjects to come to this country for direct enlistment in the imperial forces. The difficulty of according different treatment to white and colored volunteers in the same colony will be readily appreciated. It is hoped to meet this difficulty to some extent by providing openings for colored persons in locally raised units, unquote. The same memo goes on to highlight that Black West Indians, quote, would be of doubtful military value for combat service overseas, especially against German troops in Europe, unquote. Indeed, it was common knowledge at the time that during the Great War, colored colonial units had fared poorly in European winter conditions. The French had even employed a practice called hivernage, wherein blacks would be redeployed to the south during the harshest months. As an aside, hivernage...
Does that make sense?
Yeah, you trying to put some Jamaicans in Europe? It's cold as hell. They're like, sorry.
Have you ever seen this before?
No, this is good.
This guy is banned all off of YouTube. So
He's banned what for telling history? Oh, I'm sorry, but you can't talk about critical race. you can talk about like history when white people are being wretched, but you can't talk about history when black people are being wretched. Is that what we're doing? We
That's what we're
practice censorship all over the place.
keep going.
Yes.
Okay.
was implemented at the insistence of a black activist, Blaise Diagne. Indeed, modern studies do seem to support the idea that black people receive more cold weather-related injuries than do whites.
And I like that he shows the study, you know?
Mm-hmm.
One U.S. Army study from 2003 revealed that the rate was 4 times higher for blacks than it was for whites. Curiously, it is a fairly regular occurrence for black men to sue the British Ministry of Defense after suffering cold weather-related injuries. For example, as recent as 2022, Bernard Iegudu sued the ministry for over £1.5 million after he suffered from trench foot. He told the High Court that, as a man of black African ethnicity, he would have been at greater risk than others.
Is that an acknowledgement of racial differences?
Or he doesn't know how to dress for the weather.
Or his family's just from the equator?
You know what? Look, I see it all the time because I'm born and bred, you know, up here, you know, in the Midwest, and I'm in Chicago. We get really cold winters, and I see people who come here from, you know, tropical zones, and they don't know how to dress, and they are dying. So yeah, this looks accurate.
Okay, well, see what you think.
And the military should have given him special considerations. But getting back on track regarding David Reynolds' paper, Britain's stance on race during World War II was more or less consistent with their history. During World War I, the British government, quote, had avoided using West Indian troops in combat except against non-whites in the Middle East, and they were mostly employed in labor battalions. Indian troops were, however, used in action in France, but care was taken to minimize their contact with white women and to keep them out of Britain. Similar policies were adopted at the beginning of World War II. Although black pressure groups forced the government to announce in October 1939 that British citizens, not of pure European descent, could volunteer for the armed forces and be considered for commissions on the same basis as whites, this was only a temporary measure during the present emergency. And in practice, the cabinet intended that black volunteers should be mainly used in labor units in their home territories, unquote. The thing to remember here is that Britain didn't have a segregation policy because there was really no need for one. As David Reynolds notes, in 1939, there were no more than 7,000 or 8,000 blacks living in Britain. That's 7,000 or 8,000 out of about 47 million citizens, the overwhelming majority of whom were white, and the British government had every intention of keeping it this way. Reynolds indicates that although the British government relaxed some of its non-white restrictions on recruitment, this ultimately had zero effect on their desire to keep Britain white. Quote, As one Foreign Office official recorded in January 1942 after interdepartmental consultation, it became evident that during discussions on the subject of overseas manpower, the recruitment to the United Kingdom of colored British subjects, whose remaining in the United Kingdom after the war might create a social problem, was not considered desirable. This, he said, was the accepted view in Whitehall, unquote. Now is the point where we're going to get into the UK race riots of 1919 in order to better illustrate what the British authorities meant here by social problems. To a large extent, they had already experienced them after World War I and wished to avoid them again.
Keep going. Is this interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That was his avatar.
During World
I'm sorry, 1919. I was off by 10 years.
War I, several thousand colored men were hired to fill the vacant positions of British men who had gone off to fight. Some were Middle Eastern, some were West African, others were technically from the West Indies, but racially that just meant West African. Most were from British territories, although some were from Portuguese and French colonies as well. The overwhelming majority were males, and most had no established roots in the UK. But during the course of the war, they gradually began to form their own tiny colonies and communities in various port cities, mainly Liverpool and Cardiff. All in all, the total population of these non-white foreigners may have amounted to about 10,000. Many had been engaged in maritime and dock work centered around shipping. Others had served in the Imperial Navy and, after the war, were demobilized in Britain. As a quick aside, the argument here that this latter fact should somehow entitle them all to stay and live in Britain is about as silly as the idea that all Canadians and Australians should have been allowed to stay and live in Britain since they too were British subjects and had served the Empire. In any case, at the war's end, many British men came home only to find they now had to compete for jobs and housing with thousands of foreigners who had taken up residence in their port town.
Does that sound like New York right now?
Mm-hmm.
And Chicago?
Yeah, yeah.
So when they give all that training and job training to all those illegal immigrants, everyone's got to compete now.
And black people are pissed.
Often these foreigners would work for lower wages because they were overwhelmingly single and had no families to support. Now, yes, some had married local white girls and started families, but as we'll explore, many of the interactions with local females was of a dubious nature.
Now, do you think they also paid them less because they were not European or British?
Sure, of course. Why not? And they were willing to work for less. Very willing to work for less. Because even though they were getting paid less, they were still making a whole lot more than they were in their homelands.
Right.
Unsurprisingly, all this gave rise to interracial strife. Tensions culminated with a series of riots in the summer of 1919. To the extent that these riots have been covered, mainstream historians and media outlets, such as the BBC, have cultivated a very one-sided narrative in which blacks are seen as the absolute unquestionable victims of irrational nativist racism. The victim, most often brought up, is Charles Wooten, a 24-year-old Bermudan who is portrayed as an innocent bystander, chased into the Liverpool docks and drowned by a mob of thousands of angry white men. Then afterwards, the police and court system are seen as having covered it all up. As usual, though, there's more to the story that is conveniently omitted.
Can you believe that with Jussie Smollett and
Okay.
Rashard Brooks, and Jacob Blake was trying to break up a fight, and Darrell Brooks, the guy who ran over everybody in Waukesha, he was escaping, he was avoiding capture, right? And Micaiah Bryant, it was very, what did they say after Micaiah Bryant? It's very normal for girls in the hood to just have a knife fight.
Yeah. Yeah, they just rewrite the narrative. And somehow this person is a victim now.
Well, I actually believe he was a victim, but there were other victims too.
Oh,
There
yeah.
were, I believe there were 5 deaths.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going. Is this at least interesting?
Keep going.
Okay.
The Friday, June 6th issue of the Manchester Evening News explains the initial sequence of events. Quote, About 9:30 last evening, a number of Danes were leaving a public house in the neighborhood of Great George's Square when one of them was attacked by several Negroes and badly stabbed. A constable on duty interfered, whereupon he was assaulted, the Negroes using razors and knives and cutting his face and back in terrible fashion. After battling courageously with his assailants, the officer sank exhausted to the ground. Then somebody summoned assistance, and the police came in force from Argyle Street Station. In the meantime, the Negroes had fled from the scene and gone to their headquarters in Upper Pitt Street, where they are to be found in abundance, unquote. As the newspapers tell us, the police pursued these men to a lodging house in Upper Pitt Street. When the police entered the house, they were fired upon with revolvers. 4 of them were seriously wounded. One was shot in the mouth, and the bullet exited the back of his neck and struck the policeman behind him. Another was badly slashed across the face with a razor. Now, Charles Wooten was without any doubt present in this building, and he fled when the police tried to apprehend him. The Manchester Evening News even tells us that Wooten may have fired on the police himself when he fled, and that this is what incensed the crowd. Now, as far as what happened next, the details are hard to ascertain with absolute certainty because the various sources all report slightly different versions. But a crowd of angry people did form and pursued Wooten as he fled the scene down to the docks, where the police eventually caught him. The Leeds Mercury reports the following, quote, "Whether he jumped, was swept, or was thrown into the water, witnesses were unable to say, but subsequently he was seen swimming about, and the crowd threw things at him. Suddenly he disappeared, in spite of all efforts made to save him. His body was recovered nearly an hour later," unquote. Now, without much doubt, I think we can safely say there was some factor of vigilantism that occurred. A lot of the papers at the time do report that a Negro was drowned by a mob. The Globe even says there was one report in which the crowd threw bricks at Wooten. The Liverpool Echo states that Wooten was wrenched from police custody on the docks by the crowd, but that he then escaped and dove into the water himself. It then says, quote, that a detective climbed down a ship's rope and was about to pull the man out of the water when a stone thrown from the middle of the crowd struck Wooten on the head and he sank, unquote. Now, clearly, there was some extent of vigilantism here, but ultimately at the inquiry, the authorities and a jury felt there was insufficient evidence to determine how exactly Wooten ended up in the water and drowned. Historians often make a big fuss over the fact that no one was charged with Wooten's murder. But as far as I know, no one was charged either with the murder of 20-year-old shoesmith Harold Smart, who on June 11th walked up to a police constable and asked for help after a black man had slit his throat in the street with a razor. Several witnesses testified as to the presence of blacks assaulting Smart and others, but eventually they fled the scene and were never caught by the police. Of course, none of this justifies the extrajudicial killing of Charles Wooten. If Wooten was intentionally killed by the mob, then he didn't get a fair trial. But let's consider here that today, pretty much everyone...
You want me to keep going? Because he'll keep going.
Oh yeah, keep going.
Okay.
feels that after a white person calls a black person a bad name, any violent response thereafter is seen, if not justified, at least expected. People generally offer no sympathy and will often say, well, you should have seen that coming. Take, for example, the film Die Hard 3, wherein the character John McClane goes into a black neighborhood wearing a sign saying, I hate niggers. The audience readily understands that blacks are going to respond quite passionately to such an instigation. Yet, when we examine the local reaction to Wooten's behavior on June 5th, 1919, virtually no one will say, well, Wooten should have seen that coming. Blacks had literally assaulted, stabbed, and shot both civilians and policemen. And yet, in historical retrospection, we become outraged that the white people involved didn't exercise greater restraint than the blacks. Now, beyond that consideration, of the 5 people killed during the 1919 race riots, 3 were white. John Donovan, the aforementioned Harold Smart, and Frederick Henry Longman. Wooten was actually the only black man killed. The other non-white was an Arab. Let's examine the deaths of the white men, starting with Harold Smart. According
So he covers their deaths.
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking you, what do you want me to keep going?
No, keep going. I'm into it.
Do you at least like the fact that he has the newspaper articles?
Yes. Yeah, because you can see you can see what they were writing about at the time. These were the thoughts at the time, in real time. Not looking back and now we're gonna, whitewash it this way or that way.
Presentism.
Yeah.
According to the Western Mail, on Tuesday, July 1st, 1919, quote, Police Constable Thomas Davies deposed that at 10:20 p.m. on June 11th, he was on duty in the Hayes. He saw a crowd of people at the end of Caroline Street nearest the Hayes Bridge. At 10:35 p.m., he saw the deceased man, Smart, coming towards him with his hands to his throat. A nigger has cut my throat, he told the officer, who immediately put him in a taxi cab and took him to King Edward VII Hospital. Subsequently, he endeavored, without success, to find out who had inflicted the injury. The next witness, Patrick Linehan of 11 Mill Lane, stated that he saw a black man and a young fellow arguing the toss, and a white girl was standing by. 5 or 10 seconds after, witness saw the nigger turn around and he seemed to strike the white man across the face. As his hand came away, witness noticed that it contained a razor. Witness immediately rushed at the black man, called him a dirty black blank, and struck him on the side of the face. The black man fell, and witness called upon 2 white men to hold him down while he, witness, attended to the injured man. A few minutes later, he turned around and found that the black man had vanished in the direction of Caroline Street. Witness thought he would be able to identify the black assailant again, unquote. The July 1st issue of the South Wales News also reported on the local inquiry into Harold Smart's death. Quote, Bert Lewis deposed that he was with the deceased when 7 or 8 colored men came running towards them, and one said, if any of you white blank want to fight, come on. Witness ran away, and on looking back when 15 yards away, saw Smart on the ground with 1 colored man on top of him and another bending over him. The colored men appeared to be ill-treating deceased. On the advice of the coroner, the jury returned a verdict of willful murder against some person or persons unknown, unquote. Now, regarding John Donovan, the South Wales News stated the following on June 14th, quote, John Donovan, who was shot in Millicent Street and who died on Thursday night after admission to the King Edward Hospital, was a single man about 28 years of age. He was a Cardiff man and was the son of Mr. John Donovan, boilermaker, who at one time lived at 45 Mary Ann Street, where the victim of Thursday night's affair was born. He was formerly well known in Cardiff as a footballer and runner and won several cups and other prizes on the track. He was a boilermaker prior to the war, but for some time past had been serving as a driver in the Royal Field Artillery, from which he was only
Man, they give amazing obituaries back in the day. Holy crap.
a few weeks ago demobilized. Since his return from the war, Donovan had been working for the Taff Val Railway Company and had lived of late in Grangetown, where a sister lives. He was engaged to be married to a girl in the Mary Ann Street area, and the banns had been put up. 1 or 2 residents of Mary Ann Street were chatting with Donovan about 10 o'clock on Thursday night about the black men. And Donovan said, if there's any trouble up here tonight, I'll come and help you to protect your house. Almost immediately, Donovan had said this, there was a rush of the crowd to Millicent Street, and Donovan went off in that direction. It wasn't 10 minutes after that, added the Mary Ann Street resident, that news was brought that poor Donovan had been shot and that they believed he was dead. The deceased served for over 4 years in France, unquote. As to why the white crowd had formed, several newspapers reported that a Somali man had threatened a white woman. The crowd pursued the Somali to a local boarding house where several black men resided. Without a doubt, the blacks inside fired on the crowd with revolvers, killing John Donovan in the process. The white crowd retaliated then by throwing stones and ginger beer bottles. When the police entered the premises, they were also shot at, but were not hit, though not for lack of trying. 1 constable's helmet was struck. If you read through enough of these accounts, a pattern begins to emerge, revealing ample evidence that blacks and Arabs at the time were much more heavily armed than whites, and much more predisposed to firing freely into unarmed crowds and using razors in what were otherwise low-intensity fistfights. Various newspapers commented on this. The Tanton Courier said the following, quote, the fact that the Negroes are nearly all armed and fire on the slightest provocation intensifies the swiftness with which isolated encounters swell into street battles.
Now, can I read this whole thing here?
Yeah.
I think this is interesting. It says, causes of the trouble. The colored men in Cardiff are mostly seamen who have for years been voyaging to and from this country. They seem to have grown more arrogant of late. They have earned good wages and have been able to give free rein to their love of display and ostentation, and to make themselves more attractive in the eyes of a class of women who infest seaports. Some of the Negroes in Cardiff own their own houses and demobilized Cardiff men who are lucky if they get a back room feel aggrieved at the black man's flourishing state. And then he says that they are all armed.
They're all armed.
And fire on the slightest provocation intensifies the swiftness which with isolated encounters swell into street battles.
Wow.
Does that sound familiar?
Yeah. I
We-
mean,
we
it
played-
sounds like, it sounds very familiar. It sounds like there's a pattern. There's a pattern of behavior right there.
That's over 100 years ago in 1919.
Okay. There is
I gotta
a
come.
pattern of behavior that doesn't change, that hasn't changed.
Dusty.
The dust is historic, as DZ would say.
Little more?
Yeah.
Is this interesting at least?
Oh my God! Yeah, of course. Because you can see a direct line for the behavior. That the behavior, what we're witnessing today, is nothing new.
And this is the thing I was trying to point out to the Black London guy. He's talking about the race riots in 1964, and it's like, well, you don't have to go back much further, because he even said that London didn't need civil rights. It's like, well, they never planned on keeping you in the first place
Yeah.
until people like Tony Blair got into the government and just decided to make London Pakistan or Africa. Now it's called Londonstan.
Yeah, I was in London in 1983, and it was still pretty white.
Yeah.
But from what I understand now, not so much.
I'll go a little more.
Okay.
Quote. The Globe said, quote, "It has been proved during the recent riots that most lower caste colored men in England go about armed and are ready to loose off on the slightest provocation. A regulation might easily be enforced, making it illegal for a colored man to carry any arms, and a heavy penalty should be inflicted for any breach of the order," unquote. Consider here as well that at the end of May, a black man was arrested in the Liverpool docks after he slashed several white people with a razor, including a woman. He even bit a man's finger who tried to restrain him. All throughout 1919, black men repeatedly attacked individuals and police officers with razors and revolvers. This repeated behavioral pattern probably helped instigate white mobs, who curiously don't appear to have resorted to stabbing or shooting any of their victims. Now, moving on to Frederick Longman, the Yorkshire Post tells us about his murder. Quote, "Longman, who was about 30 years of age and had only recently been demobilized after serving 4.5 years in the RFA, was, it appears, returning home at about 10 o'clock on Wednesday night. He had almost got to his own door when two colored men sprang on him. A struggle ensued, and one of the colored men is stated to have caught Longman by the throat, held him against the wall, and, taking a long knife out of his pocket, stabbed him with it," unquote. Now, at the inquest, a black female witness, Louisa Richards, who was a friend of Emmanuel, claimed that Longman approached Emmanuel and told him to go find his own street to walk in, and then began hitting him in the face. Another witness, Elsie Rudman, stated that Longman was on his front door stoop when they exchanged greetings. She had gone no farther than 10 yards when she heard a scuffle behind her. She turned around and saw that Emmanuel had pinned Longman against the wall and was choking him. In response, Rudman screamed. This alerted two white men nearby, who came to Longman's aid. Now, this is where the witnesses' accounts start to seriously conflict, but essentially, the two white men got Emmanuel to let go of Longman, and then Emmanuel pulled out a knife, stabbed Longman, and then ran off. Per the Western Mail on June 21st, the black witnesses claimed that Longman had made a final lunge toward Emmanuel, which is what prompted Emmanuel to stab Longman. Charles Emmanuel said the following in his defense at trial, quote, "I defend myself with a pocket knife. I was coming down the street for a little walk after signing on, and this man said, 'Why don't you go in your own street?' I say, 'Behave yourself.' By the time I turn around to him, I speak to one colored woman, and he came behind me and hit me one clout in the eye. 3 more hit me, one with poker, and I defend myself with knife. I run away shouting murder," unquote. As an aside, Emmanuel was from the French West Indies, hence his poor English, but the Western Mail states the following details concerning the testimony of the 2 white men involved, James Yeoman and John Hopkins. Now, in the interest of clarity, I've replaced some of the pronouns and other terms like witness and prisoner with surnames. Quote, "James Yeoman, a painter, deposed to hearing a woman scream and seeing Emmanuel holding Longman by the throat against a wall. Yeoman rushed up and said to Emmanuel, 'Why don't you leave him alone?' Yeoman then struck Emmanuel a blow on the face, and Emmanuel then let go of Longman and took a knife out of his pockets, with which he attempted to strike Yeoman and Hopkins. Failing to do this, Emmanuel stabbed Longman, who was standing in the roadway in a dazed condition. Emmanuel then ran off, and Hopkins, fetching a poker, threw it after him, striking Emmanuel on the back. Mr. Marley Sampson, is it true that Longman made a rush at Emmanuel? No, sir. In cross-examination by Mr. Hugh Jones, Yeoman would not admit that Longman, after being let go, followed Emmanuel into the roadway. John Charles Hopkins of Lee Road, Barry, a ship's painter, gave corroborative evidence and said that Longman, as far as he was aware, did nothing to the accused at the time he was stabbed," unquote. Essentially, the white witnesses claimed that Emmanuel tried to stab them after they were able to free Longman, and that after he failed to stab them, he stabbed Longman, who was in a dazed state, and then he ran off. In other words, Emmanuel really wasn't acting in self-defense since Longman wasn't a clear and present danger to him. Ultimately, a jury found Charles Emmanuel guilty of manslaughter, which I think was an appropriate verdict. Emmanuel's life was not in danger, and even if the other 2 men had attacked him first with a poker, the fact is he stabbed Longman, who was unarmed. He probably could have run off to the police at several points prior, since he himself was never restrained by the witnesses or the deceased, yet he only ran off after he stabbed Longman. Now, while the verdict did seem appropriate, the sentence did not. A judge gave him a mere 5 years in prison. So how's that for racism? Again, something you will notice about the leftist-oriented academic literature on these riots is a particular tendency. When more blacks than whites were arrested, prosecuted, and or received harsher sentences, the literature repeatedly accuses the local courts and police of racial bias. And when those same courts and police acquit or lessen the guilt of blacks, this is taken as unquestionable truth.
Yeah, and then he'll go into he goes into these 2 liberal white women, and they cover crime. Well, why do I talk? I'll just play it. Or let me do this. Is this something you're interested in?
Yeah, I'm listening.
All right, I'm gonna have to head out because I got to start second shift soon.
Okay.
Do you have any time next week?
I do. You know, Wednesdays or Fridays. I'm good.
Wednesdays or Fridays. All right. Let's aim for next Wednesday, and you can see how this liberal woman likes to, according to this guy, change history.
Okay. And they do. All right.
You have a good weekend, and please stay safe.
And you too. And don't work too hard.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
I know.
Later.
Talk to you later.